Hello, BookTube. I've seen one or two BookTube channels do the end of the year book tag. One of those things that is meant to be a yardstick of where your reading is at any given year. It's a perennial tag. You can do it every year. I think I did this last year, and the year before that, and the year before that. Mainly meant to take a snapshot of where things stand as we approach the end of the year. Not many questions. I don't think it'll be a very long tag. It doesn't have to be a very long tag. Question number one is, are there any books you started this year that you need to finish? And my answer is no. I don't let books sit around. I don't let them sit on my nightstand. I don't have anything else to do but read, so there's no reason for it. Usually I'm in and out in the same book. Then question number two is, do you have any autumnal books to transition you to the end of the year? If I'm not a mood reader, I'm certainly not a seasonal reader. I'm certainly not at all. So no, I certainly would never go to a book because it has an autumnal theme. No, I'm just reading. I read books. Those of you who are new to this channel, I read mostly new releases in the American book market. And those usually are not seasonally keyed, except inspirational books and a few romance books. Otherwise, it's just a question of the pub date of the book. So no autumnal books. We'll breeze right on to question number three. Question number three is there a new release that you are still waiting for? And there are. I'm not, of course, going to limit myself to one because this is what I read. There are a few that I'm either still waiting for or they're on the shelf and I have not read my way to them yet. I want to show you just some of them. This first one is by Oren Margulis, and it is Aldis Minos. This is a little biography, one of the first biographies of this figure in quite some time. This was a Renaissance figure, Aldo Manuscio. He was the head of a publishing firm, did really high quality works, died in 1515, and this is his biography. Now, years and years and years ago, I wanted to see what it felt like to write a 1,000-page book, to intentionally set out to write a book that was gigantic. What would that be like? I wanted to know what would that be like even in terms of just handling the manuscript and finding your way around in the manuscript as you're working on the book. What would that be like? And I had a cast of characters. I had a cast of 11 characters, and Aldis Minos was one of them. And I wanted to know in the 4 months of preparation for writing that book, which is called 1515, I wanted to know everything there was to know about my protagonists. None of whom are fictional. They're all actual historical figures. So I ended up reading an enormous amount about Aldis Minos, an enormous amount of stuff that I got through Interlibrary alone at the Boston Public Library. Specifically because there was not a biography that I could find that did any kind of justice to the figure. I had to do a lot of reading, not in English. So this is not a long book. I think this is in the neighborhood of 220 pages. I would be willing to bet that I know everything that's in this. And also, there are a few books that I get in the course of a year where I can look at it and say, okay, no egotism intended, but I bet I know everything that's in this book. So it'll be a question of how the author does it, how they execute the material. It won't be a question of me learning anything. But in this case, I can go further than that, because in this case, I will know not only everything that's in this book, but I will almost certainly know every source the author draws on. So I'll be able to see what kind of a job is done. We shall see. I'm always up for it, in any case. Then we have something for the gays. You got to have something for the gays. This is this is called Christmas in Heaven. And it's a shipboard romance. Those of you who are, well, all of you are too young to remember that once upon a time, the way that you traveled was on a ship. You went across the ocean, you went on a ship. You didn't go on an airplane, you went on a ship. And there was a famous subgenre of fiction for probably 40 years of shipboard romances. The idea was, the understanding was that when you are on board a ship for a week and a half, 2 weeks, with a bunch of strangers, it's a perfect place for people to fall in love precipitously. They're doomed. Shipboard romances are doomed. Shipboard friendships are also doomed. That also was a subgenre of fiction. Only this isn't a ship, it's an airplane. There's a young man, a 19-year-old, whose name is Christmas. And he meets an older man whose life is falling apart. Actually, both their lives are kind of falling apart. They're both seeking. They're both looking for things. There are at 6s and 7s, both of them are. And they meet cute and they talk cute, and there's witty banter. And then it looks like, I haven't read this, but it looks like they are going to be each other's path to salvation at Christmas time. But since the main character's name is Christmas, and since this is a gay romance, the title... no, I'm sorry, the main character's name is not Christmas. The main character's name is Heaven. His first name is Heaven, and his last name is Leigh. Heaven Lee. So Christmas in Heaven takes on... We shall see. I don't expect much, to put it mildly. Then we have Ed Gorman has finally written a book. He's finally written the book that people wanted him to do. He was a war correspondent in the 20th century, every hotspot in the world. I don't know Ed Gorman, but he has always been one of my poster children for a claim that I have often made, which is that a lot of the journalists who go from hotspot to hotspot, they will talk about how, the people need to know, I need to brave this mortar fire in order to be there. And I've met some of these people, and I don't think that's true at all. I think they do it because they are unbelievable adrenaline junkies. Just unbelievable. To the point where a bright, burning red spot of chaos and warfare anywhere in the world draws them to it. They'll put their life on hold to go. It's not a selfless pursuit of truth, in my opinion. It's not. And he finally wrote a book, Death of a Translator. There he is, a very young man. This is going to be fantastic. I'm sure it'll be fantastic. He's a terrific writer, and he has seen all the violence of the 20th century. I don't know whether or not he fits the bill, but he certainly seems to me on the surface like one of those journalists who are drawn to the danger regardless of whether or not they're ever going to tell you the truth with a capital T, whether or not they're ever going to convey the truth to the masses. A lot of them don't ever get a chance to do that. They are running down a devastated street, diving into a basement, and huddling in dripping water throughout the whole of a bombardment. Then they come out and they see the aftermath, but they aren't able to report on the dangers involved because they're hiding at the last minute. Quite a few of these, I don't know if Ed Gorman is one of these, but quite a few of the adrenaline junkie journalists that I'm talking about end up dying on assignment. Ed Gorman did not, so this is a book that not all of them get to write, which would be good. Then we have a box set from the Library of America. They have not sent me this yet. I'm hoping that they do. I'm hoping that this is definitely a new release I have not read yet. This is a box set of Frederick Douglas, containing, I think, all 3 or 4, or is it 8 of the books that he wrote about himself? But this will have, since it's a box set, it will have not only all of the autobiographies, but lots of other stuff too. Letters, speeches. It will easily be better than any Frederick Douglass collection that I have. I'm sure of that. And the Library of America box sets are nice and sturdy. They just, they haven't coughed it up yet. Then we have ancient Roman history, because of course if you're a guy, you must think about ancient Rome several times a day. This is a new biography of Mark Antony. Specifically, it's a biography and a life and times of, because this is looking at the Roman Revolution through the eyes of Mark Antony, through the weirdly pivotal role that he played in like 2 or 3 different installments of the gradual end, the transfer of the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. Haven't read a Mark Antony biography in quite some time. There was one about 30 years ago that was not good. It was kind of weak. My favorite Mark Antony biography is now, it must be well over 80 years old. So is it due to be replaced? It'd be fine by me. We have one other ancient Roman book on this list. But first we'll go to this. This is a reprint. I'm going to use, as I do all throughout the year, I'm going to use the appearance of this reprint as a totally unpredictable prompt to reread the book. I mentioned that I read a lot of new releases in the American book market. It's a large amount of what I read. I also do a lot of rereading. And typically with the rereading, I don't know that it's mood driven. It might just be serendipity driven. if I'm at the Brattle Bookshop and I see something that I've read before that might work as a good reread, I allow the fact that I have found it by chance at the Brattle to prompt me to reread it. Same thing with the new release market. The American new release market for reprints of all kinds is actually very healthy. And this one is one of the last ones of the year. This is One Man's Meat by E.B. White. A very strange book. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Perhaps the most beautiful thing this author ever did. And this author created beauty at that typewriter all the time. All the time. This is maybe the most beautiful thing he's ever done. It's a weird combination of personal philosophy and essay and autobiography. Loops and twirls and swirls. You never quite know where it's going to go. Parts of it very effectively mimic the idea of working out thoughts on the page, which all essayists like to try to mimic, but most of them are so terrible at it. But E.B. White is not. This is a great book. And the minute I saw it in the list, I requested it. Of course, I want a new release, especially if it's got a new introduction, something like that. And then I went looking on my shelves, and I do not have this. I don't have an older copy of this, so I'll be glad to have it. This will become my copy. Then we have more Roman history. This, I think, is going to be a lot more in-depth than the Mark Antony book. The Mark Antony book might work as a book for a normal person to read, a person who isn't versed in Roman history. They could probably pick that up and read it. Much like Mary Beard's book earlier this year about the emperors of Rome, that is obviously tailored for an audience of generalist readers, not specialist readers. This next one, it's pricey, and it will be for the specialists. Fine by me. This is a big anthology of the Imperial Court and the Principate in the Principate and in late antiquity. And it will deal with, it's probably many scholars, probably a big fat thing, and it will deal with all sorts of splinter studies. What the emperors did, what mechanisms we know, what documentary evidence is there for how their edicts were transformed into the body of law, what role did the Senate play in that transformation. All kinds of things that I love. I have been, the Senate and the Imperial watchwork machinery of the empire, especially the early empire, is of endless fascination to me. How you do that, just in a broader sense from 30,000 feet, how you do that when the Senate exists as a deliberative lawmaking body and suddenly they are not. Comparatively suddenly, in the lifetime of one man, suddenly they are not that anymore. But they're still there. It's not like any Roman emperor is going to say, I'm abolishing the Senate. So what do they do? And how do they do it? I'm sure that this will be uneven, and I'm sure that some of it will be choked with academies, but I bet there's will be a lot of it in there that I like. Then we can go to popular history and also to the American Revolution. This is Joyce Malcolm. This is her new book, The Times That Try Men's Souls, quoting from Thomas Paine there. And this is about the Quincy family and the Adams family during the American Revolution. So you see the early years of the American Revolution, but through their eyes, as much as possible. We shall see if that ends up being true. We shall see. I have read now 4 or 5 books that try to do this with the Adamses or the Quincy's or the Randolphs or whatever. Most of them don't do it. Most of them say that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at these events through the lives of these fascinating families. And then they don't do it. That's maybe the opening chapter and the end chapter, and the rest of it is just another potted history. When you could do it. If you were willing to hare all around the country and delve into the archives, you could do it. The literal thing. We shall see. I'm prepared to be disappointed. And then the final thing, talk about being prepared to be disappointed. I don't know how many of you will be old enough to feel a tiny little lick of outrage at this last one, but this is by Robin Renwick, and it's called A True Statesman. George H.W. Bush and the Indispensable Nation. And to add insult to injury, George W. Bush is on the cover. They couldn't even give us a picture of just George H.W. Bush alone. They had to give us both. I think this is going to be, from what little I know about it, I think it's going to be just solid cheerleading, especially of George H.W. Bush. And we will see. There is no cheerleading that you can do about George W. Bush. None at all. there's precious little that you can honestly do about George H.W. Bush. You can cheerlead him until the cows come home if you talk about him in his personal life. But in his professional life, as vice president and president, as a statesman, I hate even using that word, as an elected member in the United States, whatever that election is, whatever job that is, it's almost impossible to do. Almost impossible. He shuttlecocked back and forth in that official life between being a rubber stamp and being pretty darn evil. So, I mean, I'm going to read these things. I'm going to read books like this. It's living history. George W. Bush is still alive. The world is still reeling from his time in the Oval Office. The world was changed by his time in the Oval Office. So I'm going to read this, but I'm not going to like it. I'd be willing to bet I'm not going to like it. That's my guess. My guess is that it's going to be a big old negative. But anyway, those are some new releases that I'm still waiting for. Then question number 4 is 3 books that you want to read by the end of the year. Well, I want to read all of these, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there's lots of, for instance, romance novels, lots of self-published stuff that I will get notified of by Amazon or that I know about already, but that I haven't got and I haven't read. There's all of that, and then there's rereading. I am right now in the middle of Dr. November, which is a booktube event dedicated to spy fiction and spy nonfiction, to espionage nonfiction. And by the end of the year, I want to do a lot more rereading of Frederick Forsyth and Ken Follett, and maybe Len Dayton as well. I want to do a lot more rereading of those 3, their spy and espionage fiction. And the reason why I want to do that is because a huge amount of the rereading that I've been doing for Dr. November has been John le Carré. And I have varied. I will reread a le Carré, and then I will reread something else. I will reread a Len Dayton, or 2 Len Daytons, or Frederick Forsyth, not just Day of the Jackal, but a whole bunch of stuff. I'll go from John le Carré to one of those other best-selling espionage authors of the 20th century. And this time around, I don't know what it is. I don't know what I'm doing right or wrong, but the comparison this time around has been utterly damning. Just horrifying. The drop-off in quality, it actually looks to me, I know this is probably oversimplifying, but it actually looks to me like le Carré and Forsyth and Ambler and Follett are all writing the same kind of thing for the same general kind of readership, and that le Carré is simply doing it much, much better than they are. It honestly doesn't look to me right now, that's why I want to do more rereading, it honestly doesn't look to me right now like they're taking different angles or there are different viewpoints or perspectives. It looks like to me like they're doing the same thing and he's just better at it by a wide order of magnitude than they are. And I don't know, that could be true. Of course, it absolutely could be true, but something about it bothers me. So I'm going to do a lot more rereading of that by the end of the year. So that definitely counts. Then question number 5 is, are there any books that could shock you and be your favorite book of the year? I highly doubt it. 2023 has not exactly been thick on the ground with favorite books of the year. I'd be amazed if Christmas in Heaven did that. I'd be amazed if any of these things did anything I'm going to read between now and the end of the year. It's only a month. It's only a month to go for new releases for me. After which point I will not be reading new releases to finish out 3 weeks in December. I won't be reading anything new for that time. So there's not much time left for a book to swoop in and be really great. I really doubt it will happen. And then question number 6 is, have you started making reading plans for next year yet? And I have not. Not the slightest. Not one hint or breath of a plan of any kind, reading or otherwise, for next year. So no, we're ending on a complete null set. But that is the end of the year book tag. Of course, if you haven't done this, I'd love to know how your year is shaping up, what the end of your year is looking like. But that's it for me. I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.